Rachel. I am a registered dietitian here in the Phoenix area. I earned my bachelor's and master's from ASU in human nutrition and dietetics, and completed my dietetic internship at the Phoenix VA. Sorry, I get a little bit nervous at first, but I'll warm up and everything will be fine.
You're doing great.
Okay, thank you. And now I'm the owner of Tailored Bites, which I call a nutrition concierge. And we do all kinds of goodness here, all kinds of nutrition related stuff. So we have a prepared meal service that we offer to clients, and then we can do tailored meal plans. So if anybody has any medical nutrition therapy needs or weight management goals, sports performance, stuff like that, we can tailor prepared meal plans to those needs. And then of course we do nutrition consulting and nutrition therapy, medical nutrition therapy, and then corporate wellness. So out in the community, promoting health and promoting nutrition. Super cool gig, and I'm very, very excited to be here tonight and chatting about carbohydrates, because I feel like they get such a bad rap, and they really can be one of the most powerful tools that we have in our toolbox with regards to weight management and really to our health overall. So without further ado, let's begin. So first, I just want to start by saying and kind of prefacing the entire webinar with nutrition is not a one size fits all. So some of the things that we'll talk about and recommendations, examples, these are just examples. Everyone's needs are completely different, and our needs even change over the years as we age, as our environment around us changes. So just know if you do have any medical conditions or taking any medications or things like that, it's always super important to consult a registered dietitian prior to making big eating changes. Don't just take this information that I'm giving and put it straight to work, because it may not really apply to you. So just want to preface everything with that. And then a little bit of background about carb counting. So what is carb counting? It's a tool that we use to manage blood sugar regulation. We use a lot with diabetic patients and clients, and then also clients who are wanting to manage their weight. To kind of explain a little bit with diabetes, so there's two types of diabetes. You have type 1 and type 2. And type 1, they don't produce any insulin at all. And then type 2 may produce some insulin, but the cells are not sensitive to the insulin. So counting carbs is a way to try and manage it a little bit. With someone with type 1, then at least they know how many carbs they're eating, so then they know how much insulin they would need to cover those carbohydrates. And for type 2, the same. Everyone's a little bit different depending on physical activity level, what type of insulin they're on, if they're even on insulin. Sometimes with diabetes, we're even able to manage it more through lifestyle. So carb counting can be super helpful for those who are wanting to manage it more through lifestyle. And then with weight management, the same thing. Carb counting can just be super helpful. We even call it kind of macros, and even with diabetics, then we're still looking at protein and fat as well. So the three macros are carbohydrates, fat, and protein. So we're looking at all of them, but we know that carbs are what influence our blood sugar the most. So that's what we're paying the most attention to, especially with diabetics. So to kind of explain how things work whenever we eat something. So whenever we eat, then it's going through our digestive system, and then it goes to be absorbed into the blood. And once it gets into the blood, the glucose we're kind of talking about right now, then it sends a message to insulin to be released. So then insulin can go to the cells, and he kind of like knocks on the door and says, let this sugar in. So if somebody has type 1 diabetes and they're not producing that insulin, of course, it's so important that they're taking insulin. So that way they have a little messenger knocking on the door. And for those with type 2 diabetes, if those cells, they really are a little bit resistant to hearing the knock on the door. So that's kind of how that works in a nutshell a little bit, just to give you a little bit of an explanation. And what we definitely don't want, so I guess with carb counting, what we're trying to do is to regulate the amount of sugar that's in the blood at any one time. So if you can see at the top of the slide, glucose in the blood and then excessive blood glucose. I always think of this whenever I was little, making Kool-Aid, and of course your mom says, you know, only put in a half cup of sugar, but you put in 2 cups and then it's super thick. And the same thing happens with our blood whenever that sugar or the glucose can't get into the cells and it's just sitting in the blood. And then that's whenever complications really start to arise with diabetes, because it's just so thick and it starts causing a lot of problems. So with carb counting, we're able to, you know, denote a certain amount of carbs that we're going to eat each day, and then split those carbs up between a lot of different meals and a lot of different snacks. So that way we're not provoking as much of a hormonal response. And even with weight management, this is good because we know insulin, it's not bad, but it is like a fat storage hormone, if you will. So it's telling the nutrients to get in the cell, but also if the cell doesn't really need those nutrients, then that's going to be converted to fat and then stored as fat. So just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of a background about carb counting and just how our bodies work. And remember, all of our bodies are different, so everyone's a little bit different, and everyone's need, even within diabetics, needs are different, so depending on a lot of different things. So carb counting or macro counting for diabetics, this may be something that they do for a lifetime because it's necessary. With weight management, it's almost like just more of a teaching tool to teach, you know, portion sizes and things like that. And we just have to be real careful. I always like to mention if there's any like coexisting mental health conditions, such as like obsessive compulsive disorder, something like carb counting or macro counting can become a little bit like the client or patient can become a little bit obsessive with it. So we just always have to be careful that we're not zoning in too much on this type of stuff, but it really can be so helpful for diabetics and for clients and patients that are wanting to manage weight and just learn about proper portion size and grams of carbohydrates. So I think it's important to kind of talk a little bit about why carbs get a bad rap. And in my opinion, I think a lot of it has to do with the $97 billion weight loss industry, constantly telling us that we need to lose weight and that in order to lose weight, we need to cut out carbs. So I think it's important that we just bring to light that we can't always directly correlate weight with health. So there's often people who are overweight, if you will, that have pristine labs and have no medical conditions. And there's also people with washboard abs that are doing horrendous things to their body in order to look that way. So just kind of trying to disconnect a little bit and realize that we are being marketed to all the time and kind of being told what we should believe or what we think about all of that. And then a second piece to why I think carbs get a bad rap is because carbs get all pushed into one box, and there really are two different kinds of carbohydrates. There's simple carbohydrates. You can think of like crackers and cookies and soda and things like that. And then there's complex carbohydrates, which are more like beans and legumes and rice and potatoes. So the simple carbohydrates often have a lot of fat associated with them. They're very easy to overconsume because they don't have a lot of dietary fiber or other vitamins or minerals, and they taste really good. So they're very easy to overconsume. And then the complex carbohydrates, of course, they have tons of dietary fiber, tons of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients, just all the goodness that your body needs to process that food into energy for our body, where those processed carbs, those simple carbs are, it's not horrible to have them on occasion, but for them to make up 60%, because that's a statistic that I just got while I was kind of designing this presentation, 60% of the carbohydrate intake of the American population is coming from those simple processed carbohydrates. So of course, if we're just always eating those, and most of the time we're eating excessive portions of them just because of fast food restaurants have it set up like that. So they get a bad rap. Carbs get a bad rap, but they really, really can be and are one of the best tools that we have. So I hope that you change your mind about carbs if you have anything against them by the time that this is over. So the power of carbs, let's talk about that because that's good. And we could honestly probably talk a whole week on the power of carbohydrates, but we only have like 20 minutes, so we have to shorten it a little bit. But so the first one, brain power. Our brain's preferred source of energy is glucose. Really, the only other thing that it can run on is ketones. I'm sure most of you have heard about a ketogenic diet, which, by the way, probably only 5% of the people that say they're on a ketogenic diet are really on a ketogenic diet. They're more on a low-carb diet and never really reach ketoacidosis and start producing ketones. But that's what your brain needs, is those ketones. If you are on a ketogenic diet. Otherwise, it needs glucose. So providing glucose to the brain is one of the powers. Saving the proteins. We are somewhat of a protein-obsessed society, and protein definitely has its part. It's important just like fat and just like carbohydrates. But we have to remember that protein, there's no storage form for protein. So like carbs, it can be stored as glycogen in our muscle and in our liver. Fat, of course, adipose tissue is our storage form there. Protein, there is no storage. It's a functional nutrient, meaning that it's active in processes. So maybe it's part of an enzyme or it's part of a muscle fiber, but no storage. So having adequate carbohydrate intake helps to spare those proteins to do the job that they need to do. So of course we need enough protein, but knowing too that if we take too much protein in, then your body has this super cool process called gluconeogenesis, where it takes that protein and turns it into glucose to either support blood glucose needs, or if that doesn't need to happen, then it will go to the liver and muscles to be stored as glycogen. And if that doesn't need to happen, then guess what? It gets stored as fat, just like carbohydrates would if you had a surplus of those coming in. So protein's important, but so are carbs, so keep that in mind. And then the third one, helps you poop. So having bowel movements is so important. That's a way for us to kind of cleanse our system. We're going to talk a little bit about dietary fiber. We have a whole slide on it here in a little bit, but just know that those carbohydrates add bulk to our bowel movements. They help to push stuff through, and dietary fiber in itself can bind to toxins and cholesterol and help us get rid of that. So carbohydrates are important for that. And then of course for energy, it truly is our body's preferred source of energy. So giving the body what it wants, so that way it will do all the amazing things that you want it to do. So now, all carbohydrates are not created equal. We kind of talked about this a little bit in one of the previous slides, but you can see on the left, you have your simple carbohydrates, and then on the right, you have the complex carbs. You can see on the left that a lot of those simple carbs also probably have a decent amount of fat in them, like the pizza and the burger and the hot dog. So it's not just carbohydrates, right? There's even protein in a lot of those too. On the right-hand side, you see the complex carbohydrates with your whole wheat bread, quinoa, brown rice. None of those really have any fat in them at all. It's just carbohydrate, dietary fiber, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients, all the goodness. And to kind of explain a little bit what happens whenever we're just constantly taking in a surplus of energy, but we don't have those associated micronutrients, which those micronutrients are little cofactors, or they're little helpers for all the processes that go on in the body, your metabolism being one of them. So if you're eating a surplus of all this food, all this energy-rich food, but you don't have those vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and other things to go along with it, your body truly is not going to be able to do what it needs to do in order to process that food into energy for your body. And that's where we really start to see people's metabolism going haywire, hormones being off, all kinds of stuff happening. So try and eat as many complex carbohydrates as possible. And that's not to say that we don't ever enjoy pizza. That's not to say we don't ever enjoy ice cream or soda or something like that. But we can't be enjoying that 60% of the time. We need to be like enjoying those complex carbs a lot more of the time, maybe like 80, 90% of the time. So dietary fiber is king or queen, whichever you like to say. Again, just like carbohydrates, we could probably spend a whole week talking about all the amazing benefits of dietary fiber. One of them, of course, adding bulk, so that way we can have good bowel movements, and then binding to some of that cholesterol. And a really cool piece that you're going to see a lot more information coming out is just its role in our gut health. So I'm sure most of you have heard the word probiotics, which is the good gut bacteria that we have. But dietary fiber is called like a prebiotic, which is food for the probiotics. So we want a lot of probiotics in our GI tract because they help to ward off, they're like the good bacteria that fight off the bad bacteria. So we want them there because they help to keep us healthy, and they need the food from the dietary fiber in order to colonize and to just line your gut really nicely. So the more fiber that you eat, the more food that they have, and what they actually do is they ferment the fiber, because our body, we don't process or we don't absorb the fiber, that's just passing through us. So those bacteria, those probiotics feed on that fiber and they ferment it, and then that creates these short chain fatty acids, which are thought to go out and be a big part of the connection between your gut and between your brain, and in regulating a lot of different processes. So I think that we're going to hear and continue to hear a lot more about this, and just the importance that dietary fiber really does have on so many levels. And even whenever we're talking about diabetes or weight management, with diabetes, the complex carbohydrates and dietary fiber helps to attenuate the spike in blood sugar, so it slows down the process of digestion and absorption. So meaning, like, if you eat a simple carb, then it kind of like sends your blood sugar up really fast, but whenever you eat a complex carb, it's just going up real slowly, and because it's helping to attenuate and just release that blood slower, release the glucose slower into the blood, which is what we want. We don't want a bunch of ups and downs. We just want little ones like that. Okay, so how many grams of carbs should I be eating? So first, you're going to want to figure out how many calories your body requires. And to do this, of course, you can speak with a registered dietitian. That would, of course, be my #1 recommendation, especially if you're taking any medications or if you have any medical conditions. There's also calculators online that people use. Just know that those calculators are going to spit out a number to you based on the information that you put in. So most of the time, they're just asking your height, your weight, your gender, maybe your age. So it's only basing its recommendation on those 4 things. But whenever you see a registered dietitian, they're going to be basing it on a lot more things than that, like medical conditions, medications, past eating history, your weight history. Because all of those things are going to play into the amount of calories we're going to want to start you out at. Then after you've collected how many calories and what you want to start out for, what your body requires, you're going to use the AMDR, which stands for Acceptable Macronutrient Distribution Range. These numbers are based on a ton of evidence-based research, and noted that these numbers, this 45 to 65%, is for a generally healthy population. So again, if you have any stuff going on, it's really important that you speak with a registered dietitian. But using that 45 to 65, if you're someone who's very active, maybe a little bit younger, have a little bit more muscle mass, you may be on the higher end of that. If you're a little bit more sedentary, maybe a little bit smaller, not as much muscle mass, you're probably going to be at the lower end of that. And then, so then once you have your percentage picked out, then you're going to convert those carb calories to grams of carbs. And we know that there's 4 calories per gram of carb. So we're going to run through an example just so you guys are with me. We're going to pick easy numbers because I'm not the best at math, but okay. So first figure out how many calories. We're going to say 2,000 calories. That's the general recommendation for a diet. And we're going to pick 50% because that's going to make it easy. So 50% of 2,000 calories is 1,000 calories. And then we're going to divide that by 4, and that's going to give us 250 grams of carbohydrates that we're going to be eating throughout the day. Now, do we want to just eat all those carbohydrates at once? No, because then what's going to happen, even if they're complex carbohydrates, if one, it would be super hard to eat 250 grams of complex carbohydrates because there's so much dietary fiber and you would feel so full you wouldn't even know what to do. But you still wouldn't want to do that because that's a lot for your system to handle at once. And even though they're complex carbohydrates, that's a lot of food at once, and it would probably spike your blood sugar to some extent. So don't do that. What we want to do though is split it amongst as many meals and snacks as possible within reason. I love to promote like breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then 3 snacks, at least 2 snacks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So that way we can spread those carbohydrates as best as possible. And you can see I took the 2,000 calories, and then our meals are all around 50 grams of carbohydrates, and then our snacks are around 30 to come up to that 50% carbohydrate there. So just a lot of times whenever clients are coming in, then it seems that they're maybe eating 1 or 2 meals a day. They go the whole day without eating, and then they have that one big meal at the end of the day. And to kind of talk about like our blood sugar, because the blood sugar, it really does provoke those hormonal responses with insulin, and we want to try and stay away from that as much as possible. Of course, it's we need it, but we don't want it to be like large surges coming out. So if somebody is only eating in the evening, it's like they start here in the morning and then slowly it just like dips down their blood sugar until all of a sudden they're ravenous, they're hangry, right? They're gonna rip someone's face off. And then they end up eating a ton of food, and probably most of the time not the best options because that's how they feel. And then their blood sugar spikes all the way up because now they've just eaten a bunch, and then what happens an hour or 2 later and you just feel so tired, you don't want to leave the couch. And so that's what's going on. But whenever we space our meals out like this and space our carbohydrates out like this, then we're just having a slow release of carbohydrate or glucose into the blood. So it's kind of like I eat breakfast, it goes up a little bit, it comes down just a smidge, but then it's snack time, goes up a little bit, down, and it's lunchtime, and it just does that all day. So you just feel energized, you feel good, you don't feel hungry at any point. So this is optimal for definitely for diabetics and for those who are wanting to manage weight as well. This can be such a great tool trying to space things out. What gets hard, I think, and I see this a lot, in which is why tailored bites can be so helpful, is it's hard to prepare all of these and to have everything set out exactly to balance your meals. I know we're not talking about protein and fat, but we still need to balance those carbohydrates with protein and fat too. So, you know, having a service like Tailored Bites and having meals prepared helps, because then they're already ready, they're balanced, you know, they're balanced with health promoting fats and lean proteins, and then those complex carbohydrates that are providing fiber, which, by the way, if you can see on the nutrition prescription, is what I call this, or like a meal plan, but the dietary fiber is at 64 grams. I forgot to mention in the last, or on the dietary fiber slide, but for women, we're wanting at least 25 grams. And then for men, we're wanting around 38 grams. That's from ages like 19 to 50. There's a little bit of variances outside of those age ranges, but just know too, if you're not eating a ton of dietary fiber right now, don't try and get to those numbers right away because your stomach will get really upset. Just ease up slowly and make sure you're drinking plenty of water as you do so, so that way you don't stock up too much and get constipated. So, but that's kind of the flow, or a rhythmic eating pattern is what I like to call it, where you're trying to eat within that first hour of waking up and then eating every 2 to 3 hours, making sure all your meals and your snacks are balanced with complex carbohydrates, dietary fiber, lean protein, and health promoting fats. And then this is something that we give to our clients after their introductory consult, and they use this in conjunction with that nutrition prescription that was just on the previous slide to sub things out. So like at the snack at the very bottom of the last one, there was oatmeal menued, but maybe the client doesn't feel like oatmeal, so they can use this chart to help guide them. As you can see, the yellow blocks there, those are foods that all raise our blood sugar. We have them broken down into servings, into 15 gram servings, because if you remember from the carb counting slide, on average, 1 unit of insulin will cover 15 grams of carbohydrates. So breaking it down into 15 grams is really helpful whenever we're trying to learn this type of stuff. And also too, so if we're trying to stick between 45 to 60 grams of carbohydrates for meals, then somebody could look at this sheet, and there's other carb counting sheets and things like that too, but they could look at the sheet and know, okay, I'm gonna have, you know, a half a cup of whole wheat pasta and a quarter cup of beans and an apple, and I'm gonna be close to my 45 grams of carbohydrates or whatever. So then that way, it's a little bit easier. They're actually learning the portion size. Like 1 slice of bread is around 15 grams, depending, of course, there's big pieces of bread and then there's your standard piece of bread. So that standard piece of bread, we're going with 15 grams. But then over time, then they learn, okay, for breakfast, I have about this, and for lunch, I have about this. And if I want to change or exchange this, then I can do that. And it just makes life a lot easier. There's a lot of work at first with carb counting and things like that, but once you get the hang of it, then it doesn't require as much thought that goes behind it. And then off to the right there, you'll see the non-starchy vegetables, the protein, fat, and spices. And then it kind of breaks down the servings and stuff like that there. So that is it for carb counting from me. And I think Lori is coming on.
Hi, that was great.
Yay.
Wow, good stuff. Questions. Okay, I am going to go through our participants, and I am going to allow you to talk. And if you don't want to, you don't have to. But if you have a question, now's your opportunity. We are giving away, Rachel, what are we giving away? Will you talk about that while I unmute everyone?
Yes, so we are giving away 2, we call them balanced meals because they're balanced with the protein, carbs, and fats, but our menu changes each week and we update it on the website by Monday noon, and then clients go, anyone can go to the website and order. You'll just want to order by Wednesday midnight. And so the gift card or the giveaway is going to be for 2 free regular size meal and then 1 of our baked nourishments. So we do all kinds of fun goodies like sweet potato brownies and spinach banana muffins and beet muffins. This weekend we're making chocolate beet muffins. So so that will be the winning prize. So you'll just order and then come pick up from the kitchen and check everything out.
Okay, if I did not allow you permission to speak and you would like to, please raise your hand. I think you have a raise your hand, or you can chat me, but go ahead. Somebody have a question? Nobody so far, okay. I'm trying to think if I had a question. It's important about the ratio, right, between the carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. So maybe in the future we could do a talk about those.
Yeah, for sure. We could do, it's like, I would call it kind of like meal balancing or something like that, but for
Oh, that'd be fun.
yeah, for sure. It really is. Because they all have different functions, right? Like the protein is more active and functional in different processes and things like that. And then carbohydrates more for energy and fats even for energy.
How
But
do you ask the question?
Well,
Hi,
yeah,
Sheila. Go ahead.
I think at the beginning of the program to be able to do that.
Okay. Sheila, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
yes,
We
I
can, thank you.
So a carb is a carb, but not always healthy. When you look at a recipe and at the end it gives you the nutrition, how do you know what a serving is?
Of the recipe,
Yes.
sometimes it's hard because a lot of times we run into that sometimes even in the kitchen with looking at recipes and stuff, and a lot of times they won't put, you know, how many servings, and to kind of explain, so portion size and serving size are different. And serving size, whenever we're talking at least about food labels, is what the manufacturer puts on the food label as a serving size. They can denote, before the beginning of this year, they could denote any serving size that they wanted. Now there's a little bit more, you're being watched now, which is good because that protects us as consumers. But so serving size is kind of what the manufacturer, or maybe even what a recipe would say at the bottom, but portion size is different, and portion size is more individualized to us as a person. So just because the serving size says a half a cup doesn't maybe mean that that's the right portion size for us. But what you could do on, to kind of answer your question about a recipe, is see how much it makes. And usually it will say serves for, or whatever it is. So if you wanted to figure out how many calories, how many grams of carbs and stuff like that, you could try and figure out how much total calories were in that recipe and then divide it by however many servings the recipe is saying that it makes. But just remember that just because the recipe says that's the serving size, that might not necessarily be your portion size. So then you would really just have to figure out how many calories, how many total carbs are in that full recipe, and then break that into the portion size that is best fitted for you. If that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. So like clam chowder, soup, that's what you're going to have for dinner with broccoli. So on the can, it said 40 carbs,
20.
20. Was that per serving or per can?
That's
Just depends.
too, which at the beginning of the year, they mandated certain updates that bold and bring to light, because a lot of times people were thinking, you get a can of soup and you think, oh, this is just one serving, but most of the time there's 2 servings in that can. So what you'll want to do is look on that nutrition facts label, and right under what it says, the portion size or the serving size, it will say how many servings are in that container. So that will tell you, is that, and the nutrition facts label will be just for the 1 serving most of the time, unless it says that there's only 1 serving in there, then of course that's just the 1 serving. So the calories are going to be for that. But you always want to look right underneath where it says number of servings per can or whatever. I don't know exactly, serving size, and then it says how many servings per container on there. So then but that nutrition facts label will only be for that 1 serving. It's not going to be for the entire can of soup. Something that they started mandating at the beginning of the year, if it's something that people think that they think, oh, this could just be a single serving, like a pint of ice cream or a can of soup, they've now mandated that they put on there what 1 serving is and then what the entire content of the jar or whatever is. So now sometimes you'll see it side by side where there's the single serving and then there's for the entire container. Do you have your soup there now? Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I don't have the can with me, but that's what we had for dinner.
That's what it said.
And that's what it said.
Great question.
Thanks.
Someone asked, can you say a little bit more about fiber? And I actually was curious if there were like examples of dietary fiber.
Dietary fibers? Yeah, so there's two different kinds of dietary fiber. There's soluble and insoluble. Soluble is, it attracts water or it absorbs the water, so it's soluble, and then it kind of helps. That's the one that binds to cholesterol and binds to a lot of toxins and stuff. It's kind of like a gooiness. And then the insoluble is just like it sounds, so it doesn't absorb any water and it just helps to push things through. It just passes through you. So they're both needed for different things. Things like bran, nuts and seeds, rinds of like fruits and vegetables, those are going to be the insoluble dietary fiber. And then things more like oatmeal and bananas and rice and bread. Some of them will have both, but those are going to be ones that are more soluble. And even if we want to talk a little bit about like bowel movements, say you're a little bit constipated, you would want to reach more for the insoluble, because that's going to help to push stuff through, as opposed to the soluble could actually slow things down even more. So you don't want to be eating too much, you know, oatmeal or rice or things like that if you're already a little bit slower moving in that area. But in the same breath, if you're experiencing too quick of bowel movements, then you may want to add in a little bit more soluble fiber so you can slow things down a little bit.
So what's your favorite? Yeah, what's your favorite soluble fiber?
Soluble, I love all things, but I love oatmeal or bananas probably. I think those are my two go-tos if I really am like, I really need soluble fiber. Those.
And then what about insoluble? What's your favorite?
Insoluble, I would probably grab like a box of Raisin Bran, or not Raisin Bran, the bran nuts, or some type of bran cereal like bran flakes. That would be, I love cereal, so that would be one of my choices. Or even like nuts or seeds can really help to pass things through with that insoluble.
Okay. All right. We have some more questions. Thanks for that. Maybe I missed it, but how does that, how that relates to carbs and what is best for digestion? Oh, Faye, she asked this. Maybe the dietary part.
What is it?
Sure. It says, maybe I missed it, but how does, maybe she's talking about dietary fiber relates to carbs and what is best for digestion.
How does dietary fiber relate to carbs, and how is...
Oh, she's asking what's best for diarrhea? What is best for diarrhea?
Best for diarrhea is going to be that soluble fiber. So like bananas, rice, like in the hospital setting or in the clinical setting, we always say like
rat diet. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So like bread, rice, applesauce. What's the toast is the other one. Yeah. So those types of things, or oatmeal, is going to help to slow things down, because it forms like this, like a gel almost, so it's going to slow things down, where that soluble fiber is just like pellets. It just is just pushing stuff through. It doesn't absorb any water or anything like that. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. She says thank you.
Yes, of course.
Any other questions that we can answer? We'll let you guys get on with your evening. If not, Rachel, thank you so much. So the reason why I reached out to Rachel was because I've always dreamed of having a weight management program, because so many of our patients struggle with their weight, because it's this vicious cycle, right? You have a sleep disorder. Most of our patients have sleep apnea, and they need to wear CPAP or an oral appliance or Inspire to treat their sleep apnea. but yet they struggle with being able to lose weight, or they've gained the weight, and it's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. And so many times they end up finally treating their sleep apnea, but their bodies have had havoc wreaked upon them from untreated sleep apnea. So I've always known that these people really need to learn about how to have healthy lifestyle changes so that their weight can be managed. So I started Sleep to Slender. So our nurse practitioners are managing this program. It is covered by your insurance as long as you have obstructive sleep apnea or sleep disorder that's related to obesity, diabetes. So many people are already like down this, but we also recognize we cannot treat people that have some of these, diabetes, kidney disorders, and we need someone like Rachel on our team. So Rachel, welcome and thank you so much. This was our first little thing tonight.
Yeah.
We're gonna hear more from Tailored Bites and her team. I hope you guys love this, and we have a winner. We're gonna email all of you. We're gonna email you a recording of tonight. We'll email the winner of this amazing giveaway. Thank you so much, Rachel, for providing that. And just one last look at questions. And if you struggle, if you're out there and you heard about this and you just were here and you're like, I might have a sleep disorder, valleysleepcenter.com. You can book an appointment with the provider right there. Ask a Sleep Coach is my personal email. You can ask me anything you want. And Rachel, how do we book an appointment with you?
Through our website is great too, or they can call. Our website is www.tailoredbites.com, and they would go under the tab shop and then nutrition therapy to see the different packages. And you probably want to start with the introductory consultation, and then we can always go from there.
All right, I have a question. Does stevia count as sugar?
No, it doesn't, but there is more research coming out, and not just about stevia per se, but just artificial sweeteners in general, that they still are able to have an effect on blood sugar, as well as kind of mess things up in our gut a little bit. And not really so much with stevia. There's some of the packets that say that they're stevia, but then they also will have like a sugar alcohol or like sucralose or something else with it in addition to the stevia. So be a little bit more careful of those. But the stevia extract, just a dropper with stevia, I think that would be the best bet. But I think that there's still research that needs to be done to really know about how, if they have a similar effect on our blood glucose as regular sugar. But I think it's definitely a better option, but just be careful.
If I'm a healthy person, what is your recommendation for how many meals I should have a day? That's another question.
I would say at least 3 meals and 2 snacks, for anyone. Being on that rhythmic schedule and getting energy into the body within a decent amount of time in the morning, and getting that metabolism going, and making sure you're sending the signal to it that you have food coming in, there's no famine going on or anything like that. So that way it's just revving and you're an individual. Hopefully you're being active on a daily basis, and and then there's no reason that you shouldn't be eating a lot. The thing I always get so much from clients is pushback. They're like, well, every time I eat in the morning, then I just get hungry, within an hour or two. And I just am like, it's okay to be hungry. It's good to be hungry. It's just what we choose is the big problem there, right? If we're striving and choosing balanced meals that are rich in dietary fiber and vitamins and minerals, then your body's just going to suck that up and love it, and you're just going to be operating like a well-oiled machine. But whenever we're reaching for stuff that's not the most health promoting all of the time, then that's where we run into trouble. So for healthy individuals, I think eating 3 meals and at least 1 snack, maybe 2 snacks, and everyone's a little bit different. Our work schedules are all different, and that makes things hard. And so you just have to try your best but having a constant flow of nutrients and coming in, it really leads to optimal digestion and absorption, which then leads to optimal like nutrient in the blood and in the cells and all of that. So it's, I think eating often is good.
So an option for stevia as a sweetener, I've heard monk fruit is really great. What is your
Yeah, that's
suggestion?
definitely one of the new kids on the block with I shouldn't say artificial sweeteners, but non-caloric sweeteners. But yeah, I really think honestly, anything within moderation, right? Like as long as we're not being super crazy with any one thing and taking in a ton of it, then having a little bit is great if you really need something to be sweetened. But even just drizzling on a little bit of maple syrup or a little bit of honey or a little bit of agave never hurt anybody. And that's, you know, like those at least have other nutrients associated with it than just added sugar, and just learning portion size and not too much of it, but enough to just give that taste. You pour it on top. You don't put it in there while you're cooking, but you just pour it on top so your taste buds taste it. Same thing with salt. And then that way you enjoy what you're eating and you're just putting real things in your body.
So cool. So in case you missed it, Valley Sleep Center is doing Sleep to Slender. We also have an insomnia program. So if you're out there and you struggle with any type of sleep disorder, sleep apnea, insomnia, you're having trouble with your weight, valleysleepcenter.com. You can ask a sleep coach. That box pops up. That's me. Or you can book an appointment, schedule right online. We're doing telehealth visits. And then Rachel, how do we get a hold of you again?
You can go to www.taylorbites.com and then go to the shop tab and then nutrition therapy and book your introductory consult there. Of course, you can always reach out by email to services@tailoredbites.com and we will talk with you and let you know anything that you need to get started with everything.
All right, you're going to get an email that says, thank you for attending this. I am going to prepare an email that will go out to all of you because we have a lot on here, 25 attendees, record number for us. Thank you so much for being here. I will give you a recording. You're going to get my email on your email. You probably already have it reminding you to come tonight. Please reach out to me. Just say, hey, how do I get hold of Rachel? Hey, I didn't get my question answered. I was muted. I didn't get to say something, and I'll connect you to Rachel. Thank you, Rachel, so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much. And
Yeah.
thank you guys for your time and for listening in.
Have a beautiful evening, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.